An outboard running on just 70 pounds per square inch of compression, long past the point modern engines would die, yet still dragging a fleet of boats through salt and storm for decades. Mechanics warn that if you own one of these, never sell it. You'll never find another engine built this way. How did a handful of designs born before the age of electronics and emissions controls gain reputation so bulletproof that today's technology can't compete? The truth behind the top 5 unkillable outboards upends everything you thought you knew about reliability. But few outside the marina want you to know what makes these engines practically immortal. So what secret decisions in the not-so-distant past changed marine engineering forever? From the late 1960s through the 1990s, a handful of outboard manufacturers operated under a different set of priorities, ones nearly forgotten in today's race for efficiency. In that era, engineering was a contest of endurance, not just innovation. Mercury, Outboard Marine Corporation, Yamaha, and Honda built engines with a single-minded focus: survive anything a boater could throw at them. The rules of the game were different. Environmental regulations had yet to clamp down. Metallurgy was dictated by what lasted longest, not what weighed least. The result was a generation of engines defined by thick-walled cylinder blocks, oversized crankshafts, and robust aluminum or bronze gear cases, components designed to outlast the hulls they were mounted on. Serviceability was not just a feature, it was an expectation. Manuals from this period read like blueprints for immortality. Power heads had detachable cylinder heads, wiring harnesses were modular, and carburetors could be stripped and rebuilt with nothing but a screwdriver and a can of cleaner. There were no electronic control units to fry, no proprietary sensors to fail, and no software to lock owners out of their own repairs. If a part wore out, replacements were everywhere, thanks to massive production runs that flooded the world's marinas and junkyards with interchangeable spares. The metallurgy of the era spoke to a different philosophy. Mercury's inline 6-cylinder engines and Johnson's V4 engines used alloys with more copper and nickel, resisting corrosion and tolerating abuse that would destroy lighter, cost-optimized designs. Oiling channels were oversized, cooling passages wide and uncluttered. Engines ran cool, even when neglected. Carbureted fuel systems tolerated old gas and debris, and their manual chokes and float bowls forgave mistakes that would cripple a modern electronic fuel injection system. This was a golden window before the Environmental Protection Agency and the California Air Resources Board rewrote the rulebook, before weight-saving plastics and emissions controls forced compromises. Manufacturers could build with a margin for error, not just a margin for profit. The result was not just reliability, it was a culture. Mechanics came to trust these engines with their reputations. Owners expected to hand them down, not trade them in. The DNA of these outboards was forged in an age when durability was not a marketing slogan. It was the baseline for survival on the water. A retired mechanic in his 70s stands at his workbench, hands stained with oil and memory. He has rebuilt more outboards than he can count, but certain models always get special treatment. These engines arrive with 70 pounds per square inch on one cylinder and still run, he says, shaking his head. That is not nostalgia. It is the daily reality in shops across the country. The engines he is talking about are not museum pieces. They are still earning their keep on the water, decades after their first launch. In the world behind the marina gates, survival is not just about design. It is about who keeps the old legends alive. Fleet managers in the Keys and on the Great Lakes keep detailed hour logs, some engines pushing past 4,000, even 8,000 hours. They do not gamble with downtime. If a motor can be saved, it is pulled apart, rings and bearings swapped, and sent back out. Commercial operations stash donor engines behind chain link fences, every lower unit and carburetor tagged for future resurrection. The economics are simple. A bulletproof outboard is worth more running than any new replacement. Rental fleets and tour operators keep binders of maintenance records with serial numbers and handwritten notes tracking each engine, second, third, or even fourth life. Salvage yards have become treasure troves, not graveyards. Owners call ahead, hunting for a crankshaft or gear case from a 30-year-old Johnson or Mercury. There is a brisk trade in used parts, some so common they are stacked in milk crates, others rare enough to spark bidding wars online. Aftermarket suppliers still produce rebuild kits, impellers, and ignition parts for engines long out of production. On the busiest days, a salvage operator might ship blocks and lower units across continents, proof that the demand for these classics is anything but nostalgic. Mechanics warn their customers, do not sell it. You will regret it. The logic is hard to argue with. Once a proven engine leaves your hands, finding another is nearly impossible. That is why some shops quietly hoard their best cores, rebuilding them again and again. It is not sentimentality. It is respect, earned by engines that refuse to die, and by the network of people determined to keep them running. Every outboard on this list had to meet a strict set of standards, criteria drawn from decades of mechanic wisdom and real-world survival. Simplicity comes first. Engines with basic carburetors, minimal electronics, and straightforward ignitions are favored because fewer parts mean fewer points of failure. Longevity is non-negotiable. Only models with a proven track record of running for 20, 30, even 40 years, often logging thousands of hours, qualify. Parts availability matters just as much. Massive production runs and a thriving aftermarket ensure that replacements and rebuild kits are easy to find, keeping these engines alive long after most would be scrapped. Abuse tolerance is essential. These outboards are known to survive salt water, neglect, old fuel, and even overheating without catastrophic failure. Reputation among mechanics carries real weight. Only engines that inspire respect in shops and forums, those called bulletproof or unkillable, make the cut. Ease of rebuilding is another requirement. If an engine can be torn down and repaired with simple tools, it stands a better chance of a second or third life. High resale demand signals a model's value. When used prices climb, it is a sign that owners and collectors know what they have. Finally, historical significance matters. The engines chosen help define boating for generations, leaving a legacy that outlasts trends and marketing hype. Every claim about these outboards is backed by hard evidence, mechanic logbooks, fleet hour meters, and the salvage yard ledgers that track which engines keep coming back for second lives. The process starts with data, not stories. Hour meters on commercial Yamaha 70 outboards and Johnson 5.4 outboards routinely show 4,000 to 8,000 hours before a major teardown. In the Florida Keys, a rental fleet manager flips through a binder filled with maintenance entries, oil changes, ring jobs, impeller swaps, all matched to serial numbers and service dates. These logs are not just paperwork, they are survival records, proving which engines actually last. Salvage yards keep their own kind of census. Crates of Mercury inline 6 blocks, tagged and ready for rebuild, outnumber the modern digital models that arrive locked up or unsalvageable. Part supply graphs from aftermarket catalogs tell the same story. Rebuild kits and ignition parts for 1980s outboards still outsell those for many newer engines. Mechanics submit photos of hour meters and handwritten logs, some pages yellowed with age, others updated just last season. The evidence is everywhere, if you know where to look. Only engines with this level of verifiable real-world survival made the cut. The next section puts these legends under the microscope. A battered logbook sits on the counter at a Keys rental operation, pages thick with oil stains and sun-faded ink. One column stands out, hour totals for a row of Yamaha 70 horsepower two-stroke engines, each engine tracked by serial number. The numbers climb into the thousands, 8,000, 10,000, even 12,000 hours across a decade of daily 10-hour shifts. Mechanics call these Yamahas the cockroaches for a reason. Their secret is all in the block: thick-walled cylinders, a forged crankshaft, and a carburetor system that shrugs off old gas and salt air. No digital ignition, no sensors to fail. In Southeast Asian fishing fleets, the same model is run until the paint is gone, then rebuilt on the beach with nothing but hand tools and a parts box. One mechanic jokes, if it's got spark and compression, it will still tow a net. For every engine that finally gives up, another is pieced together from donor blocks and scavenged carburetors, proof that the design's simplicity is its armor. 1,000 miles north, a retired marina manager keeps a different set of records. His fleet ran Johnson and Evinrude 4 engines, 90 to 140 horsepower, two-stroke, built from the mid-1970s through the 1990s. These engines earned the nickname farm equipment for a reason. With oversized bearings, thick castings, and brutally simple loop-charged carburetors, they were made to survive neglect. Rental fleets hammered them with 10-hour days, bad fuel, and salt water. The logs tell the story: ring jobs every few seasons, impellers swapped once a year, but the power heads just kept turning. One entry reads, "Down 2 cylinders, still starts every morning." Mechanics rebuilt them on the dock, swapping pistons and bearings, sending the same block back out for another season. The VRO oil injection system, controversial in its day, was often bypassed in favor of premix, another nod to survival over convenience. Even after the company that built them vanished, parts bins stayed full thanks to millions of engines produced and a thriving aftermarket that refuses to let these V4 engines die. In the back room of a Midwest salvage yard, rows of Mercury inline 6 blocks, known as towers, wait for their next life. These tall 6-cylinder two-stroke engines, built from the 1960s through the late 1980s, are legends among mechanics. The secret is in the metallurgy: high copper content aluminum, oversized main bearings, and a crankshaft that could double as a boat anchor. Ignition is classic magneto, with a distributor cap that can be cleaned and reset by hand. Carburetors are simple, robust, and nearly immune to the varnish and debris that cripple modern fuel injection. One block wears a tag, pulled after 15 years in salt, still runs. A former fleet manager from the Chesapeake tells of engines that outlasted the hulls they were mounted on. When compression drops below 80 pounds per square inch, they are rebuilt, sometimes bored out, sometimes just fitted with fresh rings and sent back to work. The yard's owner keeps a running tally, shipping rebuilt inlines across continents to operators who know that, for sheer resilience, nothing modern comes close. Each of these engines, Yamaha 70, Johnson Fiv 4, Mercury Inline 6, survives for a different reason. But the result is the same: a reputation built not on marketing, but on decades of hard evidence, handwritten logs, and the quiet confidence of mechanics who know exactly which engines will outlast the rest. A Mercury Black Max 5.6 sits on a battered transom, its paint faded, decals half peeled by salt and sun. Inside, the story is all metal, thick crank webs, a block so overbuilt that mechanics joke it could outlast the hull. One Mercury specialist, 40 years in the trade, recalls a Black Max that came in with water in the cylinders, compression down to 60 psi on one bank. The owner had run it dry, overheated it, and then left it uncovered through 2 hurricane seasons. The mechanic drained the block, swapped the rings, fired it up, and watched it idle smoothly on the test tank. He says he has seen hulls rot away and leave these engines behind, but the Black Max just keeps going. Fleet logs from Gulf Coast shrimpers show the same pattern. Engines logging 4,000, 6,000, even 9,000 hours, rebuilt and returned to service year after year. The secret is in the oversized cooling system, water jackets wide enough to flush out silt and salt, impellers nearly twice the size of modern equivalents, and a metallurgy that shrugs off corrosion. Mechanics call it the V6 you cannot drown. Across the continent, a different kind of survivor waits in the shadows of a lakeside cabin. A Honda BF8, built in the late 1980s, sits untouched through long winters and humid summers. The owner, now in his 70s, tells the same story every spring. He pours fresh gas in the tank, primes the carburetor, and the engine starts on the second pull. The Honda's all-metal gears and camshaft, its simple carburetor, and thick-walled block are relics of a time when small four-stroke engines were engineered with the same caution as their larger cousins. Marine surveyors report finding these Hondas running after decades of storage. Their only maintenance a new impeller and the occasional oil change. In remote fishing camps across North America, the BF8 and BF15 are passed down like family heirlooms, engines that outlive canoes, docks, and sometimes even the cabins themselves. The Honda BF8 keeps coming back. Patterns begin to emerge. The survivors share oversized cooling passages, conservative metallurgy, and simple all-mechanical fuel and ignition systems. They tolerate abuse that would cripple a modern outboard: overheating, salt intrusion, bad fuel, years of neglect. Mechanics relay stories of Black Max FIV6 engines revived from saltwater submersion and Hondas that fire up after years in the dark. Commercial operators and cabin owners repeat a warning: do not sell it. You will never get another engine like this. In every case, the engines were built to run cool, resist corrosion, and welcome repair. Design choices that have become rare in an era obsessed with weight and efficiency. The evidence is everywhere, from mechanic logbooks to family stories, pointing to a simple truth. These engines survive not by accident, but by design. A modern outboard dies, and the owner waits, not for a part, but for a code. The digital age promised smarter engines, electronic fuel injection, computer-controlled ignition, sensors tracking every pulse. But every new circuit adds a fresh way to fail. One faulty engine control unit and a $15,000 motor becomes a paperweight. Mechanics talk about engines bricked by voltage spikes or salt intrusion, locked behind proprietary software only a dealer can access. Repair is not a matter of swapping a gasket. It is waiting weeks for a shipment from overseas or for a specialist with the right diagnostic laptop. Owners report downtime stretching into months, all because a sensor tripped a code no one else can clear. A decade ago, a blown carburetor meant a Saturday afternoon with a rebuild kit. Now, a blown circuit board means a call to the manufacturer, and sometimes the answer is no. After 2006, the rules changed. The EPA Phase 2 standards demanded lower emissions, and the industry responded with a new generation of outboards, lighter, cleaner, and packed with electronics. Carbureted two-strokes, once the backbone of commercial fleets, vanished from showroom floors. In their place came four-strokes with thinner castings, plastic intake parts, and computer-managed fuel systems. The trade-off was clear. Engines ran leaner to meet hydrocarbon caps, coolant systems shrank to save weight, and every new sensor became a potential point of failure. Mechanics tracked the results in their logs. Modern engines had shorter service intervals, more frequent electronic faults, and a shrinking margin for error. What was gained in efficiency and compliance came at the cost of the old engine's brute reliability. The evidence sits in rental yards and salvage bins, bulletproof classics rebuilt for a third or fourth life, while newer models wait on parts or diagnostics. The compromise is written in the regulations and reflected in every hour meter that stops short of the old legends. Today, as manufacturers chase lighter, smarter, and greener designs, the core lesson endures. True reliability is engineered, not marketed. The outboards that built their legend on simplicity and brute strength still power fleets worldwide, some logging 10,000 hours, far outpacing many modern replacements. Every engine built today inherits this legacy or ignores it at its own risk. What would you trust to bring you home?